When you think of Japan's economy, one thing probably comes to mind: debt. A massive, terrifying mountain of it. The story we've been told for decades is that it's a ticking time bomb. But what if that whole story is wrong? What if the answer to Japan's future isn't in some complex new theory, but hiding in another country's past? Let's dive into Japan's great debt dilemma. Yeah, this is the question, isn't it? The one that's had economists and investors wringing their hands for decades. They point to Japan's books, they warn of this catastrophic collapse that's always just around the corner. And honestly, when you see the headline number, you kind of get why they're so worried. 235%. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. Japan's government debt is more than double the size of its entire annual economy. It is by far the highest in the developed world. It's not even a close race. So you look at that and you think, okay, open and shut case. This is a disaster waiting to happen. But is it really that simple? All right, so let's get right into it and challenge that core assumption. This idea that a debt ratio over 200% is some kind of automatic death sentence for an economy. Because it turns out, history tells a very different and pretty surprising story. Okay, check this out. On the left, you've got Japan today at 235%. Now look at the right. That's the United Kingdom, right after World War II. Their debt, a staggering 250% of their economy. That's even worse than Japan's today. And here's the kicker. Britain never defaulted, not once. So how on earth is that possible? So seriously, how did Britain pull it off? This isn't just some dusty old history lesson. Their story is actually a potential playbook, a roadmap for how to manage what looks like a completely impossible amount of debt. Now, this was not a quick fix. Not at all. We're talking about a 45-year journey. They started at that peak of 250% back in 1945, and then for decades, they just let steady economic growth do the heavy lifting. And get this, by 1990, that insane debt ratio had shrunk all the way down to just 30%. I mean, what an incredible turnaround. It was all about time and growth. So how is this even possible? Well, Britain basically had three secret weapons in its arsenal. First, it had currency sovereignty. It could print its own money, the pound. Second, the post-war boom came with high inflation, which is actually great for shrinking the real value of old debt. But it was the third factor that was the real game changer. And it's the one that is absolutely crucial for understanding Japan's situation today. And that secret weapon, that key ingredient, actually has a name. It's called Domer's condition. Now, this might sound a little academic, but stick with me, because this one simple economic idea is the key that unlocks this entire puzzle. Not just for Britain's past, but maybe, just maybe, for Japan's future. So what exactly is Domer's condition? Honestly, the concept is surprisingly simple. All it says is this: as long as your economy is growing faster in nominal terms, that's the real growth plus the rate of inflation, then the interest you're paying on your government debt, then your overall debt burden will actually get smaller over time. Your economy literally outgrows its own debt. It's that straightforward. Let's put this in terms we can all relate to. Think about it like this. Imagine you get a pay raise every year, so your salary is growing by, say, 5% a year, but the interest rate on your mortgage is only 3%. Even if you don't pay a single extra penny on that mortgage, just the minimum payment, that loan becomes a smaller and smaller piece of your financial pie every single year. That's Domer's condition in a nutshell. Simple, right? And look, this isn't just theory. Here's the hard data. For 3 straight decades, from 1945 to 1975, Britain's nominal growth averaged a whopping 8.8% a year, and their borrowing costs, just 6.5%. The math is clear. The economy was consistently growing faster than the interest on the debt. That, right there, is Domer's condition in action, and that's what saved them.
Okay, so let's pivot back to Japan, because to understand why their debt got so big, we have to look at their recent past. And their past was, well, it was the polar opposite of Britain's. We're talking about 3 decades of a punishing, soul-crushing economic condition: deflation.
Which, of course, brings us to the obvious question. If Japan's debt wasn't caused by something like a massive world war, like Britain's was, then where did it all come from? Why did it balloon to these astronomical levels? Well, the answer really lies in one single event: the spectacular bursting of its massive economic bubble way back in 1989. What came next was a 30-year economic ice age. Deflation set in, that means falling prices and basically zero growth.
Private demand just collapsed. So in that kind of environment, the government had to step in. It had to spend and spend big just to keep the entire economy from sliding into a full-blown depression. So you see, this debt wasn't really a choice. It was a necessity.
And to give you a sense of just how bad it got, think about the mood back in 2008. The main stock index, the Nikkei, crashed below 7,000 points. People were genuinely, seriously wondering if the entire nation of Japan could actually go bankrupt. Now fast forward to today, and that same index is more than 7 times higher. It just goes to show you how deep that crisis was, and just how remarkable the current turnaround is starting to look. So, after wandering in the economic wilderness for 30 years, is there finally a path out for Japan? Well, the optimistic answer, and it's a big one, is yes, it looks like there is. And the crucial turning point, the real game changer, is this. Japan is finally, after 30 long years, exiting deflation. Prices are starting to rise again, wages are starting to tick up. This one thing completely changes the entire economic playing field, and it opens the door to using the exact same strategy that worked so well for Britain. So, the playbook for Japan seems to have 3 clear steps. Step 1, escape deflation. Well, check. It looks like that's finally happening. Step 2, target a nominal growth rate that's higher than what it costs them to borrow money. And step 3, the hardest part, keep that going. Maintain it consistently over the long haul, just like Britain did. That is how they meet Demar's condition and start to shrink the debt. So, what would that actually look like in practice with real numbers? Well, let's say Japan could target a sustainable 2% real GDP growth, and you combine that with a healthy, stable 3% inflation rate. You add this together, and boom, you've got a 5% nominal growth rate. As long as the interest they pay on their debt stays below that 5% mark, they are officially on the exact same path to recovery that Britain successfully walked decades ago. So it all comes down to this one question, doesn't it? Can history repeat itself? We've seen the historical precedent. The economic logic, Domar's condition, it's crystal clear. Japan is at this massive turning point, finally breaking free from that deflationary trap that held it back for so long. Now the challenge is still immense, no doubt about it. But the path to a sustainable future, it might just be hiding in plain sight, right there in the history books. So can Japan actually follow the British playbook? That, right there, is the multi-trillion-dollar question.